I'd like to call this meeting to order this evening on Monday, November the 6th, 2023, 6 p.m. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land which we gather is the traditional territory of Anishinaabe, Ottawa, and Mississauga peoples. Confirmation of the agenda. That the agenda of the Township of North Huron hereby accepts the agenda for November 6, 2023 council meeting as presented. Do I have a mover? Deputy Reeve Faulkner? Councillor Wright? All in favor? Carried. Disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Public comment. This opportunity for members of the public to speak to an item of business on the agenda for 2 minutes per person. Come up front, just say your name for our clerk and where you live, and then go ahead, sir.
Yes, I'm Luke Silver. I make an application in section 357, 358.
Could you turn on the mic there? Sorry, Mr. Schindler.
Skillet.
Yeah.
SCH is
SCH,
pronounced
Schindler.
SK.
Ah, I see.
Same as school.
There we go.
There.
I made an application under section 357, 358 to 359 of the Municipal Act for a reduction of a house on Marnock Line. I have had zero communication with MPAC about it, other than I made that application of reduction of those taxes. There is a reduction made. By accepting this, I still hope to reduce the taxes further. So I don't want to be left out on that, because the majority of the house is coming down.
Okay.
Okay? I want to make sure that I can still do that.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to that, clerk?
So Director Towns will be available for questions when you get to agenda item 7.2.1.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no more, we'll go on, move to number 5, consent agenda, that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent items 5.1.1 to 5.1.2, and further, that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives consent items 5.1.3 to 5.3.9 for information. I'd just like to begin with 5.3.8. Our Director Fortney, he received a certificate of the road supervisor certification. And on behalf of council, I'd just like to show our appreciation on this accomplishment, and thank you very much, Director Fortney. Would anybody like to pull anything out? Go ahead, Deputy Reeve.
Thank you. Through your Reeve. I'd like to pull out 5.3.6. It's the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus in their letter in response to the strong mayor's powers. I agree with their sentiment that the provincial government downloading those powers onto the municipality will also download a lot of the costs to it, and it in my opinion, it only helps the larger municipalities. Doesn't do anything for any rural or towns, under 1 million people, to have such power. So I would like to see a letter of support be sent to the, I guess, would be the Ontario Provincial Legislature.
Thank you. Anybody? Go ahead, Councillor Van Hitterson, please.
Yes, I would like to note 5.3.4. Call for amendment to the Legislation Act from 2006. We have to realize how fortunate we are here in our area to have 2 local printed newspapers. A large segment of our residents rely on printed newspapers, so it's very unfortunate that Metroland Media Group sought bankruptcy protection, and I would like to have staff send a letter of support of the resolution from the Township of McKellar to the noted people at the bottom there, if that's possible.
Okay, thank you. Duly noted. So I'd like to pull 5.3.4 and 5.3.6 from the.
Chris has
Oh, sorry, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Yeah, a couple of things I have a couple of things. And within bills, 5.21, I'm just curious about a couple. Check number 4549, it was for $9,000 for an engineering company regarding the house and dam. Was there something, is there something happening, or was it a report that was finished, or what? Does anyone know?
Okay, we'll ask Director Fortney to,
Through Hugh Reeve Heffer to Councillor Palmer, I'd have to look into that and get back to you on that one.
Okay.
and did you have another one?
Yeah, I do. Check number 0416, it's to a staff person here, and it's regarding, it's not much, but it's still, I wonder, $1,500. And it seems to be for something that would be part of their regular employment. So I was just wondering why, is it something that was worked on outside of work, or what? It had to do with fitness and events planning.
Through you, Reeve Heffer to Councillor Palmer, I believe that was our fitness supervisor who's completing one of her designations under ORFA,
Okay,
Ontario Recreation Facilities Association.
good, thank you. And my other one, if I may, Reeve, is a big one, 523, COLA. Normally, we have dealt with this, council has dealt with this on an individual, as an individual item. Like there was a major change last year, if y'all remember. And to have this in this omnibus set of items, I thought it was not in character. I think it should be pulled. I believe it should be pulled, and council should discuss it. You know, it's $200,000. You know, I think we just saying, you know, yes to everything and it gets tagged along, I don't find that as the correct way of dealing with this subject.
I guess this calculation was taken out of the HR policy, but, and again, it was because they struggle with retaining staff, but if council wants to see changes, it can be addressed at the, in the budget process.
Are you right? It sounds like it's fixed if we say yes to this.
Through your worship, to answer Councillor Palmer's question, yes, that's certainly correct. I guess for council's recollection, last year, there was the number presented for information purposes, and staff used that number, and then as part of the pay equity exercise, it was a different number that council ended up with. Ultimately, this, based on your HR policy, this is saying, here's your calculation, or based on your calculation you set out in your policy, here's the number. Staff are going to use that in preparation of the budget, and council can ultimately go with the number they want later on. But like I say every year, instead of changing the number, I highly recommend you change your policy, right? That way you're not disregarding your policy. So you're better off to establish a policy that works for council, as opposed to have a policy and then just disregard the policy every year. So.
Yeah, it doesn't mean we disregard it every year. We certainly did last year. And, you know, maybe some of us feel 3.6 is still too high. But anyways, as long as, like, I take it as it's fixed if we pass this, but if you're saying that it still can be discussed at budget time, then I'm fine.
Ultimately, staff use these numbers to prepare the budget.
Well, you've got to
and-
start with something, I understand that.
Sure. Yep.
But as long as it still can be talked about. Okay.
Okay, so do you want to read it?
Yeah, so basically, your first motion would be that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent items 5.1.1 to 5.1.2, and further that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives consent items 5.1.3 to 5.3.9, exclusive of 5.3.4 and 5.3.6 for information.
Do I have a mover? Counselor Van Henderson, Counselor Whitfield, all in favor? Carried.
So your next motion, so again, you can deal with them separately, but the way I have it crafted here, it would be that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby directs staff to send letters of support for agenda items 5.3.4 and 5.3.6. So if you want to deal with both the letters that that are being requested to be sent, then you can certainly do that in one motion, or you can deal with them separately.
Deputy Reeve Faulkner and Counselor Van Henderson, all in favor? Carried. Public meetings and hearings. We'll welcome Mr. Phil Beard at this time with Maitland Valley Conservation Authority. He's going to give us an update and work plan, and look forward to what you have for us, Mr. Beard.
Great. Well, thank you, Reeve Heffer and members of council. I believe Councillor Van Henderson is going to assist me with the presentation as soon as it comes up.
Yeah, so if you hit, it's all on there. So if you hit escape out of there, and
Okay.
yours is open as a PDF.
All right. Escape again?
Nope.
No? Or is it? Technology's great.
Yes, it's just open as a PDF here.
Ah, there it is, okay.
You'll just be able to scroll.
We had the same
Great.
classes in school.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, the purpose of our presentation. May I have a little bit of light, Councillor McBurney? Thank you. The purpose of our presentation is to update Council on the activities that MVCA is undertaking to improve the health of the watersheds located within Maitland Valley's Conservation Authority's area of jurisdiction. Our vision is working for a healthy environment, and we will highlight some of the activities that are outlined in the newsletter that is included in our package here. MVCA's mission is providing leadership to protect and enhance local water, forestry, and soil resources. I will now turn the presentation over to Phil Beard, General Manager, Secretary-Treasurer, to highlight some of the major activities that we are working on in 2023. Thank you.
Great, thank you. This is a map of our watershed. It's a very large watershed, as you can see. It stretches from Amberley on the north over to almost Arthur on the east, down to Milverton, Seaforth, and across to halfway between Goddard's and Bayfield. The map illustrates the land use in the watershed, so you can see everything in that beigey color is agriculture, almost 78%. Everything in green is forests and wetlands, and of course everything in blue is water courses. And in terms of forest cover, we do have 16% forest cover left in the watershed. So we're fortunate to have some of the most productive farmland in all of Ontario in the Maitland watershed. We also have some of the finest hardwood forests in Ontario, and the Maitland River is considered to be one of the best smallmouth bass fishing rivers in southwestern Ontario. And of course, the Lake Huron shoreline is valued for tourism and recreation. These are all natural assets that sustain prosperity in the Maitland watershed. And these natural resources are also the foundation of our life support system, along with clean air and a stable climate. I'll just go through each of our service areas and some of the major things we're working on. This is a picture of Hairston in June of 2017, when we got 176 millimeters of rain in 6 hours, and it caused about $10 million damage in Hairston. So we're working with the town of Minto to develop a flood mitigation strategy that involves rerouting the river around the town. So all they need to find now is $23 million so that they can afford to do that. So the risk of flooding is increasing. A hotter climate holds more moisture in the atmosphere. This increased moisture can form atmospheric rivers, which increases the risk of intense rainfall events, such as the storm that hit the north part of the Maitland and Harriston in 2017. So we work with our member municipalities to help them identify ways to reduce the damages and loss of life from flooding. And moving along the Lake Huron shoreline, we're also working with our shoreline municipalities to identify homes and cottages at risk from bluff collapse, shoreline erosion, and flooding. We've worked with several lakefront cottages to move their cottages back from the shoreline. The picture you see there is a recent collapse that happened in the north part of Ashfield Township a couple of years ago, and they've been moving their cottage back to the back of the lot where it's feasible to do so. So moving on to our watershed health work that we're doing. Forests are an integral part of the health of the watershed. We've just completed an assessment of the health of the forests in the watershed, and here's what we've learned. The health of our forest is at risk. Forests are losing their ability to maintain their health due to the level of stress and disturbance that's occurring. 20% of the standing trees were found to be dead, mainly ash trees, but other species are being impacted as well. Invasive insects and disease, such as the emerald ash borer and beach scale and woolly adelgid and soon to be oak wilt, are also affecting other species. Invasive plants like buckthorn, garlic mustard, and periwinkle are creeping into our forests. Existing woodlot management practices. The removal of forests. Since 2015, we've lost over 500 acres of forests because they've been removed. Extreme wind events, and last but not least, a hotter, drier climate is placing additional stress on forests. So the next step in our work, forest health work, is to work with landowners, counties, and the forest sector to determine how we can improve the health of forests. These are unprecedented challenges that will not be resolved quickly or easily. Moving on to our watershed stewardship services, we're focusing on restoring natural areas in floodplains, river valleys, and along watercourses. There's over 6,500 hectares of floodplain river valleys to be restored and approximately 1,300 kilometers of stream buffers to plant. So this is a picture of a stream buffer that we worked on with a landowner up north of Listowel a number of years ago. On the left-hand side, you can see all of the plants that were put in there and shrubs. And on the right-hand side, the river valley was reforested by the landowners approximately 40 to 50 years ago. Some of the key adaptations that we're working on with the agricultural community, a hotter, drier, and longer summers is increasing the risk of intense rainfall events, and warmer, wetter winters means there's an increasing risk for soil and nutrients to be washed off the land and into watercourses. So two of the key changes that we're encouraging to help keep soil and nutrients on the land are rural stormwater management systems, such as the picture on your right. It's a picture of the Scott Farm of the rural stormwater management system that was put in place there, and you can see how it helps to slow the water down, spread it out, and it allows it to soak into the ground instead of running off the land into the watercourse. The other key change is cover crops, the picture on your left. So keeping the land covered over the winter helps to keep soil and nutrients on the land and out of watercourses over the winter months. One of our key projects that we've been working on in North Huron is the Scott Municipal Drain Restoration Project. It was completed last year, and it was restored as a brook trout stream, and a stormwater management system was developed to keep soil and nutrients on the land and out of the drain. It's also designed to allow surface water to replenish the aquifer that provides water to the drain throughout the year, to keep it healthy for aquatic life. It's a model for how we can have good drainage and a healthy environment. We also had a number of tours at the Scott Drain Project this year. Melanie Pletz, the owner of the farm, and myself were asked to take a number of groups on tours. This is a picture of Lisa Thompson and her political staff. They came out in August to take a look at the project because they're in the process of designing a whole new program called Resilient Agricultural Landscapes that is based on the work that we did on the Scott Drain, and that program will be launched sometime this year. And it's to help farmers improve the health and resiliency of municipal drains across Ontario. So moving on to our conservation areas, it's a picture up at Falls Reserve. Over the past 3 years, the people across the watershed have rediscovered the value of spending time in nature. Our conservation areas have experienced a significant increase in use by the public for walking, fishing, bird watching, biking, camping, canoeing, and picnicking. To help accommodate this increase in use and improve the experience for the public, we've been improving infrastructure in our conservation areas. So we've installed heavy-duty gates at the access to the trails at the Stapleton Tract, located northwest of Wingham, to prevent ATVs from driving through the area. So some people decide that they want to experience nature on ATVs, but it can cause quite a bit of damage on some of our trails. So we've tried to put in heavy-duty gates that they can't pull out. And so far, fingers crossed, we've been successful. They have tried at a couple of locations, but have been unable to, so far, pull them out. We've also constructed heavy-duty gates at Lake Wawanosh and Saratoga Swamp and put up a new information kiosk out at Lake Wawanosh. And we wouldn't have been able to improve this infrastructure without the support of our member municipalities and the Maitland Conservation Foundation, which is the fundraising organization to support MVCA. Turning to Wawanosh Valley, it's located in East Wawanosh, and it's a very popular place for people in the area to visit all year round. Some of you may have noticed that the barns out at the Wawanosh Nature Center have been removed as they're no longer used for programming and structurally not sound for people to be in. One of the barns was used by a large colony of little brown bats. So Maitland Valley worked with staff from the Toronto Zoo to construct a bat condo. So it's not only people that have a shortage of housing, but little brown bats need more housing as well. So we built the condo to accommodate up to 3,000 bats. The colony at the Wawanosh barn held about 300 or 400. So we're hoping for an increase, and we've planned for that. And last but not least, the Maitland Conservation Foundation is raising funds to construct a picnic shelter at the Wawanosh Valley Conservation Area for the public to use. Our fundraising goal is $140,000, and we've raised about 15% of that to date. And the new structure will incorporate rock and timbers from the old barn, as well as the former silo. The new structure will also include wheelchair-accessible picnic tables. And if you know of anyone who'd be interested in contributing towards this project, please contact Chris Snell, Chair of the Maitland Conservation Foundation, any board member, or myself. So I'll now turn it over to Councillor Van Hittersum to close our presentation.
Thank you. Maitland Valley Conservation Authority members thank Council for the support in 2023. We look forward to working with you on the environmental challenges we all are dealing with. If Council is interested in learning more about any of the initiatives we have outlined here in this evening, please feel free to contact Phil Beert or myself, and we would be happy to organize a session to discuss them in more details. Phil and his team are fantastic community leaders. They are working with the provincial government, Conservation Authority and OMAFRA, advocating for the importance of our natural environment and for the physical and mental health from our residents. I would like to thank Phil for this presentation and providing Council and the public with the work MVCA does in our community and where our tax dollars are spent. Thanks.
Thank you. And if any members of council would ever like to go for a tour or learn more, we'd be happy to take you out, and staff as well.
Thank you, Mr. Beard. And again, I noticed one thing that you brought to our attention there, the cover crops. I just can't say how important that is when you drive through the agriculture community, the green fields and just the growth coming up there. We know that's not going to get down to the Lake Huron where a lot of it goes. And I just appreciate that. With that, is there any comments? Go ahead, Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Rave. Yeah, Phil. When you're going to build this pavilion, was there talk about having a bit of an educational component to it? Like
Well-
the old days, because they were great. It
Yeah,
was great.
the way it's going to work now is the Avon Maitland School Board is starting their own environmental program using our properties. So they're going to do what they're good at, which is education for children, and we're going to do what we're good at, is providing good natural areas for them to come to and to have infrastructure for them to use. So we see it as a new win-win partnership. We're also working with a private company called the Atlas Forest Schools, who are offering forest school education to children. So they're also using a number of our properties, Falls Reserve and the Galbraith Conservation Area, to provide opportunities for children to get out into nature. So just like everybody else, we've had to restructure our work to focus on the things that we can do well and let others focus on what they do well. So there is going to be a program, it's just going to be different.
Any other questions for Mr. Beard? Seeing none, well, I just want to thank you there, Mr. Beard, and appreciate your work with us, along with Councillor Van Hitterson. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Phil.
6.2, Paulo of Veterans Fairly Green Incorporated. I don't see him here. So, okay, what will we do with that, Mr. Lamb?
So, yeah, if that's the case and the delegate's not here, the delegate would be required to submit another request form through the proper channels and appear as a delegation at a future meeting.
Okay, thank you. So we'll carry on to reports. 7.1.1, CL 2023-20, schedule of 2024 regular meetings of council. Are there any questions for Clerk Lamb? I have a mover. Councillor Palmer, Deputy Reeve. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the Deputy Clerk Planning Coordinator dated November 6, 2023 regarding the schedule of 2024 regular council meetings, and further that the proposed 2024 schedule for regular meetings of council be approved and posted on the Township's website, and further that the attached 2024 schedules for Wingham BIA Board and Blythe BIA Board meetings be received for information purposes and posted on the Township's website. All in favor? Carried. Finance Department, 2023-25, Section 357, tax refunds. Are there any questions for Director Towns? Go ahead, Councillor Palmer, please.
It's just a question of interest, Director Towns. When a house is demolished, you know, we see a tax refund. We also know that taxes are on the house and an acre. Is that taking care of that too? Does it negate the acre?
Through you, Reeve Heffer, to Councillor Palmer. When a 357, 58, or 59 tax application or even a request for reconsideration goes through MPAC, they assess the whole property. So they will, for a demolition, they will reassess the whole property, and then we will receive a new assessment roll for that property, and we will refund or do a supplementary billings or as needed, as directed through MPAC with the assessment change.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I'm okay with the reduction for this year, but all I want to know is that I'm not excluded to appeal once the house is finally demolished.
Director Towns, please.
Yeah, through you, Reeve Heffer, to our resident, you can continue to apply as needed. MPAC with your 350, 750, and 59 applications, that's going to trigger MPAC. But on top of that, your demolition permit will also trigger them to come and reassess the property.
Thank you.
Once and for all.
Well, anytime there's an application, yeah, depends on the situation, yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Were there any other questions for members? Seeing none, okay, thank you. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of Director of Finance Treasurer dated November 6, 2023 regarding tax refunds under Section 357 1DL of the Municipal Act in the amount of $8,241.79. And further, that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby approves adjustments to the collector's roll as recommended by the Director of Finance Treasurer and Report Finance 2023-25 dated November 6, 23. All in favor? Carried.
You have to have,
You need a mover and seconder.
Oh, do I not have a mover? May mover, please. Councillor Whitfield, Councillor Van Hitterson, all in favor? Carried.
So your delegates may be here now.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, I would suggest going back to agenda item 6.2.
Okay, at this time, we'll go back to agenda item 6.2, Paulo, of Veterans Fairly Green Incorporated zoning, non-compliance for proposal renovations at site. Just come on up front, please.
Good evening, everybody. Apologies, we checked online and we saw that it was 6:30, but apparently it's 6. But thank you for taking the time to hear us. I guess everybody probably has the updated information. We do have hard copies of it in case you wanted to refer to it. I've met with a few of you, I guess, this past week, and we're just basically hopeful that the bylaw provision that allows for the affordable rental housing to move forward at this site has been reviewed and hopefully can be relied upon so that we can get to work and create the affordable housing for you.
Okay, so did you want to bring a presentation? You're allowed about 10 minutes.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to distribute it to everybody? I'm going to have to keep one for my reference.
Through all these, I don't, maybe Ian hasn't seen them. Thank you.
Thank you.
that's all right, thank you.
So I'm not sure if everybody has had an opportunity to review the documentation that was put forward for the delegation purpose. The existing building at 22 Veterans is something that's been there for over 100 years as far as we understand it. Certainly exceeds the vintage of the establishment of the bylaw. The building itself is intended to be reused in its current general format. We intend to convert the 14-unit retirement home component into 9 residential dwelling units, affordable residential dwelling units. And we intend to keep the existing tenancy, which is on the second floor, who's actually the previous owner, Wanda, of the retirement home. And she's there, and she'll continue on. And then we intend to create a commercial storefront on the Veterans Road facing component. Some types of business and personal services use, we're not sure exactly. Once we get approval and building permits underway, we would put it for lease and see, which type of business would be interested in using that space. It would serve well as an office space, accountant, lawyer, really any type of business and personal services uses that would be permitted by the C4 zone. We've got a bit of a situation with that building in regards to the fact that, as most of you know, there isn't any parking on that site. The deficiency of parking is a normal circumstance for buildings of that nature in towns like Wingham. There's probably, I don't know, I'm sure there's at least half a dozen other buildings here right on Josephine Street that would have a similar scenario in terms of the fact that if the parking that is required through the bylaw were fully required by those buildings, they wouldn't be able to exist. It's normal in most North American towns, downtown and the cities, they're all deficient on parking. I spoke to a couple of you that were mentioning about the fact that I guess there's some openness, and we're hopeful that there's some potential to reduce the necessity for parking, number one. I think we've gone through all of the official plans supporting documentation, which gives a lot of avenue for relief. It's a bit of a unique situation because in our view, we don't require any zoning relief. We're basically just asking for the existing provisions of the bylaw to be allowed to continue or to be exercised is the correct word. We acknowledge and appreciate that this is not often a question before you, but there is language that we feel is quite clear on this particular building in this particular location that makes it fairly straightforward for us to get this affordable housing built as soon as possible for the constituents of Wingham. So we're looking to your support and hopefully just a simple clarification of the bylaw so that we can get to a building permit and get started on the work. Glad to answer any questions that anybody may have. I think I would leave it to you. I think we're sort of we're set on the clarity of the language which already exists in the bylaw, and we're hopeful that we can all acknowledge it and move forward.
Okay, thank you. At this time, though, our CAO would like to talk a little bit about this. We'll turn it over to you now.
Sure, thank you. So first of all, in terms of, we're looking forward to working with you on this residential project. There's certainly a need for more housing in our municipalities, so we'd very much like to see this project to move forward. So as you're aware, in terms of staff have been in discussions on numerous occasions regarding the proposal, and as you've indicated, in terms of the proposal includes a change of occupancy from a retirement home to a residential use, and there is a greater or higher ratio for parking requirements in our zoning bylaw. So our zoning bylaw indicates that for residential uses, it's 1 parking space per residential unit. And going back in terms of your earlier comment in terms of the previous use, so a retirement home, for example, is 1 parking space per 4 rooms. And what you're proposing to do in terms of changing the occupancy is you're increasing the requirement for parking. Prior to retirement home, it was a bowling alley, and it is acknowledged that in our downtown core, not all buildings, there's a lower threshold for parking for those types of uses, and the reason for that is because we have municipal parking lots. So people can park their car, for example, in a municipal parking lot, use a bowling alley, and then they leave. But with respect to a residential use involves the cars there overnight for days or weeks or whatever the time period is. So we're looking at a different scenario in terms of a bowling alley to a retirement home and now to a residential use. But again, we very much would like to see this project to move forward. So in terms of the parking, the bylaw indicates the parking can be located entirely on site. It can be located entirely off site, or it can be located for a combination of on site and off site. And in the event that you're unable to provide the parking either on-site or off-site, there is the ability to provide for a zoning bylaw amendment. So, you know, in terms of, at this point, there's no decision for council to be made. If you wished for council to make a decision, I strongly recommend that you submit a zoning bylaw amendment application, and council will then have something before them to make a decision. In terms of motions for consideration, motions are done by council, not by the public, and not by developers. So, I mean, certainly, you know, if council wishes on their own accord to make a motion, they can certainly do so, but it's not standard that motions are put in front of council for consideration. Council makes their own decisions through their motions. So with that, I would strongly recommend either, again, pursuing one of two options, which is looking at off-site parking. I don't know if you've spoken with adjacent property owners. Back in 2005, there was an off-site parking arrangement for this building, for this use. And so that was put into place with an adjacent property owner, and that worked very successfully to the best of our knowledge. At this point, to our knowledge at staff's level, we don't know whether or not there has been any engagement with the adjacent property owners with respect to investigating parking. At a staff level, we have certainly investigated it, and we do have some concerns just in terms of, because Farley Lane, is a single lane and not a double wide. So we are working with a reduced width through that area, but that's not to say that, you know, something's not possible. And again, we certainly want to work with you to make this happen. But as I've indicated, in terms of without a zoning bylaw amendment application, there's nothing here for council to make a decision on. If you wish to move forward with an application, I certainly encourage you to do so. Make that application. We will go through the proper process and procedure under the Planning Act, and then that will then come to council, and then council at that point will make a decision. But in the absence of a planning application, at this point, my advice to council is that you receive the presentation for information purposes.
Thank you. Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, sir. So, again, our position is that there is no requirement for a zoning. I know that the simplest way forward to interpret this is not to interpret it at all, and to put the onus on the proponent and adjacent landowners when there's very clearly an exemption for this type of building is, we feel, quite frankly, unfair. We understand that it would be the most straightforward approach, and we understand the language that you've detailed, because those same statements were made through a series of emails and correspondence with your office and the CBO, et cetera. But I think that there was never a clear response to the very simple and plain fact that the language for a permitted use, so the retirement home was not a permitted use. So it fell under a different auspices of the Planning Act. We are proposing an exclusively permitted use within this building. So it's not the same category. In relation to your question, as far as my understanding of the letter that was generated to allow for that to proceed in the past, there is the person who gave that parking option is no longer willing to do that. The reason that parking option was a necessity when the retirement home was approved was because a retirement home was not a permitted use in the C4 zone. We are proposing a permitted use in the form of residential, rental, affordable dwelling units, and we are proposing a permitted use in the C4 zone. When we're proposing permitted uses, there's no real obligation or need to make any kind of zoning change, because we're not proposing to operate outside of the auspices of the zoning bylaw. So this is where the conundrum is. in terms of our position. So I do understand that, you know, the preferred method is the way that you're describing it, but we don't feel that from a language perspective in the bylaw that that is the method, the only method for relief. The bylaw is fairly clear on the point 3.21, which allows for existing buildings and structures to continue their use. It actually specifically outlines parking as one of the items that is exempted from having to be met, as well as a multitude of other ones. Incidentally, there's a multitude of other items that if the C4 zone setbacks were taken into account and the lot coverages and all sorts of other things, this property would not make any of the requirements met. But 3.21 allows for the exemption to exist only for this style of property on an existing lot with an existing building that existed prior to the establishment of the bylaw. We would not be asking for this relief, with all due respect, if it wasn't an existing building that existed prior to the implementation of the bylaw. So, for the record, we just want to be clear that you're refusing the interpretation of the bylaw 3.21 and its allowance for an existing permitted use within an existing building.
So through you, Reeve, just in terms of, so we have sought an outside opinion, and staff have been supported in the outside opinion interpretation of the zoning bylaw. So in terms of seeking the relief, again, if that is your wish in terms of seeking the relief opposed to looking at off-site parking, I would certainly encourage you to submit a zoning bylaw application, and then that will come to council for consideration. And council will then make a decision whether or not they wish to grant that.
Okay, so just to be clear again, you're refusing the implementation of 3.21 of your own zoning bylaw?
Sorry? It's, I'm not sure in terms of what you mean in terms of implementation. It's staff's position that for residential use, one parking space is required per residential dwelling unit.
So 3.21 is not effective to this particular location or building. Is that your position, sir?
Yeah, my position, to be honest, is I'm not here to argue. I'm just here to indicate what the municipality staff's position is with respect to the zoning bylaw. And again, we certainly want you to move forward with this project, and we certainly want to work with you on this project. At the same time, there are processes if that's the option that you wish to choose to pursue.
If we were doing this in a greenfield development, I completely agree with you that we would have to go through these zoning bylaw amendments. But just out of curiosity, can you please perhaps explain to me what the point of 3.21 of the zoning bylaw is? Maybe I'm missing something, or maybe that third party that gave you some information has got some other information that we haven't seen clearly. We've also sought third-party advice on this point, and the advice that we've sought is quite clear on the point that 3.21 does offer the relief that is sought. If it was for a different reason, we completely understand. If we were proposing something outside, like the retirement home of many years ago, which did not have a position in the zoning bylaw in the C4 zone, it required a zoning bylaw amendment. There is no doubt about that. We are not proposing an item that is outside of the zoning bylaw. We're proposing items which are in full compliance with the zoning bylaw, save and except parking. And again, most of the buildings on Josephine Street would not meet the requirements for parking. So it seems like it's unfair that this particular project would need to meet the requirement of having 10 full parking spots, when in fact today, as it stands currently, there is somebody residing in that apartment who lives there, and there's no necessity for them to move or to change their positions, nor is there a necessity for any of the constituents on the main street of Wingham or any other street really, in Ontario or North America to move from their current locations, even though their buildings are in all likelihood quite deficient in a parking format. So you're asking us to become into full compliance with a greenfield development parking requirement when we're trying to build affordable housing. We feel it completely unfair and inappropriate to the circumstance of the bylaw. 3.21, we believe, is quite clear on the point. Perhaps maybe just as an analogy type scenario, you could point us to how 3.21 is a tool that is used in your bylaw. Perhaps, maybe it's never been used before, we're surmising, I don't know.
So
go
a
ahead.
question. So for example, if someone in one of the commercial buildings downtown wanted to do a major renovation, would that building permit be issued? So a commercial structure with residents above it that's got no parking spots, but someone wanted to do a major renovation, but, which required a building permit, would that building permit be issued or not?
Go ahead. Hannah.
And maybe it's complicated, but, I mean, that's the analogy we're dealing with here, I think, right?
I'll ask Hannah, she's our planner, if she'd be able to come forward and to the mic there, please.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. Through the Reeve, so in that case, it would depend on the property and the status of the residential units and when they were established. I can't really speak to the nature of how the building permit would be granted, but that's how we would look at it under the zoning. I would just need some more details on your question. It would certainly depend on the property. What I will say is that when we have received other inquiries to add new residential units, I think that's the important piece here, is the adding the new use, and as Dwayne mentioned, the change in occupancy. In that case, if it does have a greater parking requirement, that parking is required to be provided. And so we have had other similar inquiries from other property owners on the main street in Wingham, and we have told them the similar response as to the delegates in front of you this evening.
Okay. Are you happy with that, Mr.
Yep, I
Wright?
am. Thank you, Reeve.
Thank you. Okay,
May I ask a question of Hannah, perhaps as well, in terms of the implementation or the interpretation of 3.21 of the town's bylaw?
Through the Reeve. Yeah, so in terms of our opinion on the 3.21, we're of the opinion that the proposed renovation does seek to further reduce the potential non-compliance of the property. And again, that's, as Dwayne mentioned, the greater parking requirements. That's also emphasized in section 3.26. That also says that the parking requirements do apply if there is a change of occupancy. And so this case, the residential use does require those parking spaces. And so that's our opinion that we have given as staff.
thank you, Hannah. Okay. Okay, were there any other questions from councilors at all? I think we'll probably be getting a report back from staff and, but not go that way. I'll ask the clerk at this time.
Yeah, so through you, I guess to answer your question, Your Worship, it would depend on the direction provided by council. Obviously, as the CEO indicated, staff's position is that you receive the delegation for information purposes, and then council would receive something if a zoning bylaw amendment application was submitted, and it would go through the processes under the Planning Act to process that application.
Okay.
Could I ask one more question, Reeve?
Yes,
'Cause
go
I think
ahead.
It's a salient point. So I'm just curious, I know that when we talked earlier, there was reluctance about asking neighboring landowners to allow parking. But after we met, it occurred to me that you're certainly willing to make improvements to the areas around it, right? Like, there is one adjacent parking lot across the street, which is not in good shape. The one across the street is just kind of dirt and gravel and stuff like that. So, I mean, if I was a landowner, I would think it would be a fairly reasonable trade to allow use of parking spots in exchange for that kind of improvement. So to me, it seems like a deal a neighboring landowner would accept. So I'm just wondering why you haven't gone that route and why you haven't talked to the landowners with that kind of proposal.
So the gentleman who had previously engaged the retirement home, because the retirement home was a non-complying use within the C4 zone, I'd indicated that he didn't want to continue on with the provision of parking. The other more complex entry that's come since the acceptance of the C4 use with the retirement home, is that through the series of communications that we've had in regards to the property, there's an obligation to register those things on title. I think that ultimately the benefit of the affordable residential rental housing is for the entire town. I don't really think on a personal level that it's fair or acceptable to ask private constituents to put to allow their properties to be devalued for the purpose of the benefit of another property. I think asphalting might be something that can be discussed with the town. I think the entry, as we discussed that evening when we met there, of a third party into this conversation, I think is unfair. I think there's a willingness to potentially work with the town on some adjacent lands, like I believe that there is actually sufficient room, understanding that the original position of having a quick glance at it says that the traffic direction is one way, although there's no indication of that. Certainly, veterans is one way. I think deploying that resource and energy in a controlled way amongst two parties as opposed to including a third party, I think is the better way. Providing 10 parking spots is a very substantial onus to be put on that development. We don't feel that that is appropriate or fair in regards to it. We also feel that there's absolutely been no response to our points that are very clearly outlined in the official plan that actually give the municipality a great deal of latitude in forgiveness of parking. Let's say that we don't agree with the interpretation of 3.21, which obviously there's a difference of opinion there. But the official plan of the town is very clear on the point that parking can be given, or the exemption from parking can be given. You know, and it doesn't say that it has to be through a zoning amendment. That's not a requirement. I mean, I think there's two ways forward. We're being asked to apply for something that we don't believe is an onus in this circumstance, and that there's clear language that says that we don't have to apply for it. Naturally, if we go through the rezoning process, we can probably navigate a solution, but why do we have to rezone something which is already zoned correctly for its particular use? We're not asking for something to be outside of the uses within the C4 zone. We've actually particularly tailored the application so that it's fully compliant with the zoning bylaw. We haven't asked for any type of use like the retirement had to previously that would initiate the necessity for a zoning change. We're not asking for that. We've actually brought the building back into compliance with the zoning bylaw, save and except the parking. So, I mean, I think it's an unfair thing for us to go and start knocking on doors. We had some initial conversations, quite frankly, before this 3.21 was discovered in the language, because it takes time. You know, each bylaw is slightly different, the language is slightly different, and it took numerous, reviews with some quite experienced people as well in these fields. And, you know, I mean, language is language. I mean, it's quite clear. I mean, it is a bylaw. You know, it is there, and we're going around in a circle around the fact that the bylaw is quite clear on it. Now, if it was for another purpose, we wouldn't be asking. If it was for a purpose that was outside, like a retirement home, outside the zoning bylaw, we would not be requesting this. Are we still willing to, as we mentioned before, do some kind of a different treatment which doesn't put the onus completely on the proponent in terms of deploying some energy to beautification of the street in front, perhaps doing some lining, things that will benefit all of the community? Yes. We've set a budget aside for that, and we're willing to deploy that resource, even though, quite frankly, going through a different process, moving this sort of up the next steps of the requirements in Ontario, which would be the land tribunal. We don't think that that's really an appropriate way to go forward. We would prefer to do it less in the sort of forced way of the zoning bylaw amendment, which is what we feel that we're being forced to do it, because otherwise there's no chance for moving it forward. Rather than do that, we'd say, you know, as a goodwill gesture, simply in a part, we would say, you know, we will deploy, you know, let's say an example of $20,000 as a budget towards beautification of that street, towards paving it, towards putting in a retaining wall, which inevitably will benefit the entire, you know, community in that area. Not only will it benefit the building that is being worked in, but it'll also benefit the spillover parking from the Salvation Army or from any of the proponents or constituents that are coming into town. It will benefit everybody. You know, lining that, I understand about snow removal and the necessity to do that, but putting lines on that street, number one, is a pretty typical thing to do on a street. Number two, I think would make it a lot clearer and neater for everybody. And I think that, quite frankly, a few parking spots could, I think 4 or 5 parking spots could easily be generated in that particular area on municipal property that aren't currently there. We're willing to explore and investigate that, but we don't feel that being forced to do a bylaw amendment is the correct, you know, direction in light of 3.21, which is already offering relief to this development. You know.
Okay. Okay, well, you brought your delegation before us, so we'll go from there. We'll look forward from the clerk what you want us to do right now then, please.
Well, so at this time, I think it'd be appropriate for council to put a motion on the floor, providing direction on the matter.
Okay, so does somebody have a motion they'd like to bring forward? Go ahead, Deputy Reeve, please.
Well, just to move it forward, I'll make a motion to accept the information as presented.
Okay. Do I have a mover?
And I guess
Oh.
just for clarity,
Clarity?
to receive it as presented, or to like accept what is
No,
being-
just for information purposes.
So I will just bear with me here while I craft that.
Yeah.
Because I don't find any direction from the conversation, so I put something forward. Nothing's been asked, so.
Okay, so Deputy Falconer, I just ask that you confirm this is what you're looking for, but the motion would be something along the lines of that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the delegation from Veterans Farley Green, Inc. for information purposes.
Okay, you moved it. Seconder? Councillor Wright? All in favor? Carried. Okay. Well, thank you for your presentation. Appreciate that.
Appreciate your time as well. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Would you like your papers back?
Sure. Well, you can keep them and review them if you
Well-
want. For future
Well, we have them on.
We have it all
on
electronically here.
electronically. We have it all electronically.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So much more tangible.
Just get your stuff.
There. Good, thank you. Okay, at this time, we're moving on to 7.2.2, Finance 2023-29, 2024 Draft Fees and Charges Bylaw. Before I take any motions, I want to have it that everybody gets be able to ask their questions, Director Towns, and then each one be able to provide comments, and before we move on for a motion. So I'm just going to read that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from Director of Finance Treasurer dated November 6, 2023 regarding the 2024 draft fees and charges bylaw for information purposes. And further, that the council directs the Director of Legislative Services clerk to prepare a bylaw adopting the 2024 fees and charges for the November 20th, 2023 council meeting. Okay, at this time, are there any questions for Director Towns? Go ahead, Councillor Wright.
Yeah, so I don't think we can move forward with this report as presented. You know, there's just too many unknowns with this report, right? Some fees went up, some fees went down. It doesn't explicitly state what fees went up, what fees went down. A report should come with the analysis done on it, right? And the analysis should tell council, these are the changes we made, This has went up, this has went down, this is why we made the decisions to put some up and put some down. And hey, here's the highlights that you really need to focus on in this report, right? Like, that's just standard report writing. And, you know, so this, you know, I'm certainly, through my own researches, delved into Schedule G, found that significant changes are being proposed. Those changes have not been discussed in council, so it came kind of as a shock to me. Talking to all the other councillors, it came as a surprise to everyone but the Reeve and Deputy Reeve, who actually had advanced knowledge from staff on this point, and the rest of council didn't. So I think, given, I think, as Reeve said, we should all have a good discussion about it. I think the staff should take that input, but, you know, I do not think this is a report where we can suggest a few tweaks here and there. I think we need to have a good discussion in council on it, and, you know, have a revision of the report, and then have that revised report submitted to council, taking into consideration the direction council provides tonight, and then hopefully we're to the point where, you know, we can review it, understand all the nuances of it, and then, you know, suggest some tweaks if possible, and then adopt it at the next council meeting, or adopt the draft at the next council meeting anyways.
Okay. Okay. Deputy Reeve, please.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Reeve. I'd like some clarification on the assumption that the Reeve and Deputy Reeve have any more knowledge of this report than council has. I received the report exactly the same time that every other councillor did. I don't know what was in it until I read it. So I'm not sure what the implication is to having the Reeve and the Deputy Reeve have pre-knowledge of the report. I take that rather personally. As far as transparency, I'm all for transparency. If you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that I've somehow either the Reeve or myself have misused our authority and somehow subverted the process, the same process that's been going on for the 5 years that I've been on council, nothing has changed as far as what reports come and when they come.
So I can clarify that, Reeve. I don't think anything was done deliberately or intentionally. The reason I made that statement is I talked to everyone on council. None of the councillors, until I informed them, had any indication that there was going to be massive changes to the service fees for recreation. And the Reeve and Deputy Reeve did. So
Excuse me, no.
So
I didn't know until you knew, like the same time. So how did I know ahead of time? I hadn't seen the report.
So there's nothing in the report that tells us that. That's my point.
So how would I have not had
Well, that's
prior
sorry,
knowledge?
That's what well, when we had the
You're accusing me of
conversation,
something, and I would like a
when
clarification.
we
If
had
you
the
can prove it.
conversation, you said you knew it already. That's
What?
knew that there's going to be massive
I
changes
knew there was
to
a report
service
coming
fees.
because we did a
But
pre-council.
but the report doesn't say anything that there's massive changes to service fees. That's my point. This report doesn't, this report is proposing that we're going to double or triple service fees, and there's nothing in the report that actually states that.
So how could I be guilty of that?
I'm just repeating our conversation, and that when I addressed this concern with you, you said you had already understood that and already had knowledge of that.
Okay, go ahead.
Of the report? You asked me that question after I had the report.
But there's nothing in the report. There's not a word in this report that says we're doubling or tripling recreational service fees.
Not unless you go and look at
Not
what
a
the
word.
report was before, what the current one is and what the new one is supposed to be.
Right.
Then you would make that an assumption for yourself.
Right, and that was my previous concern, that it should not be up to council to do analysis, right? The analysis should be done for us and presented as such. The danger of each councillor trying to do their own analysis is we come up with different numbers. I was on the phone with the Reeve trying to figure this out, and he's looking in one spot and I'm looking in another spot. and we can't even figure out how much the service fees are going up. But, you know, we're getting off the rails here. I'd like to have a good discussion in council. I'd like everyone to express their opinion on what the proposed changes here. I think that discussion in council should have happened, quite frankly, before this was worked on by staff, not after. And the only thing I'm asking is, and I will be making a motion after that to refer this proposal back to council, or back to staff, sorry, is we can't make simple comments and tweaks on this report. I know there's big changes in Schedule G, which we're not, which this report did not highlight, right? We had to do our own research for that. I simply did not have the time to do independent research on every other schedule. That was brought out today. You know, myself and another councillor worked today. We did not have time to dig into that and do comparative analysis. So I think the best path forward for where we are is we have a good discussion of council. Staff take that discussion, go back, do a revision, and then, you know, present it for the next council meeting where hopefully it's close enough to the mark of what council wants, so that we can adopt it at that point.
Okay, you had your hand up. Councillor Van Hitterson,
Yes,
please.
thank you very much. I think this report is pretty thorough. We can see in the report that the senior management team was involved, reclamation department supervisors were involved, director of finance, everybody was involved. In our the new strategic plan, and at the public meeting we had, it was 100% told to us, like, we want lower taxes and user pay fees, and this report is just doing that. It is trying to lower taxes, make the users pay. I had the bylaw from last year is for all of us accessible through the website. I had it saved on my iPad, so if we want to compare, we can compare, and we can't just nitpick through things, and that is not our job. It is staff's job to provide us with a report and reasoning why things are being done, and this is a result, I think, for sure, for council's request and what the residents from North Huron said, like, we want to change and we want a good change, so keep our taxes lower and do the user pay system. So I don't really have a big issue with the whole thing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'll go down here, a hand here, and then to Deputy Reeve after.
Yeah, I had similar issues with this report. I didn't know what to do with it. I was given figures, and to me, they were just figures. I didn't have time to go digging and do an analysis, but others did some. And then I asked, well, somebody should supply this year's fee structure so we can compare. And this is something that I found in lots of times in our events here, in our meetings, that if we could compare, it was a lot easier to make the decision. But, you know, there's some of them that are just way off. And like for the family deal's gone, and it used to cost $1,100. So if you did it all on an individual basis, you know, it's twice that. It's $2,300. That's my analysis, and it could be wrong or right, but that's what I got. $2,300. And then the question is, okay, this is something we should have discussed. Would a family pursue that in this day and age? A lot of them may not. And then we've lost that amount of money, and they may go somewhere else, and they may do other things in these towns too. So I think we need to, when I was asked, you know, how do we deal with taxes and stuff, yes, I said we have to deal a little bit we have to increase our fees and the fee structure, but I expected we'd have a meeting about it. I truly did. And then come to our decisions and go through. That's what we would tell staff. So the process was a little bit off here, I felt, and you know, I can't support this. It's not complete. And so I think that's just maybe a lesson learned for everybody, all of us, including us, council. We need to have complete reports and complete analysis of things. Anyhow, I agree. I think it should go back to staff, and then would offer an opportunity for us to put more input.
Deputy Reeve, you had your hand up, and
Yes, thank you, Rita. Just
Okay.
two comments. Well, a comment and then a request. The comment I'd like to make is the assumption that any information is not fully available. It's available to the public. The public would have to look at it in order to find it, to look at it, to make their own decision. It's as much as the council. If there's a situation or a policy coming up to council, I find it ludicrous to think of a councillor coming in unprepared. Just because I didn't get time, or I didn't feel like looking at the numbers, and I need all the numbers in front of me. That's not an excuse for that's just ignorance of your job. That's our job to do, to find out, to dig, get our information individually. We don't need to be spoon-fed information. It's right there in front of us. That's my comment. Secondly, I still haven't seen any relief from the accusations to the Reeve and the Deputy Reeve. I request either a retraction of that comment, but if it's going to stay public and in the records, I require relief from that. Other than to prove the accusations that for some reason the Reeve and the Deputy Reeve had information or did something that was out of the realms of the normal council proceedings, as I've been accused, or else I leave this room accused.
you had your hand up there. Go ahead.
Yeah, so as I stated before, I said that because the Deputy Reeve told me he already knew, and he actually thought the information was in our package. And actually, I talked to another counselor and got corroboration that, am I missing something? And the other counselor said no. So I don't have proof of a verbal conversation. I'm sorry, and it can't be provided. But my second comment is I know I had conversations with a lot of council, but I just want to make sure it's understood and on the public record, because the public is going to be watching this meeting, trust me, that right now, if a senior or student wants to participate and use the squash courts, have a swim in the pool and access to the fitness center, right now, that individual pays $516, if I have the most accurate up to date.
For
Staff, what's that?
For a month? For
Annually. $516 annually is what they pay. This staff proposal is indicating that cost would go up to $1,820. So that's going up by more than 3 times. So I'm on the record. I am dead set against that. I think that's a crazy fee increase. And no one here in this room and no staff has any idea what impact that's going to have to our membership. Like, we could lose half our members. We don't know, right? Like, we don't know. There's no analysis been done. I don't think anybody has any experience with those kinds of fee increases. We could lose half our members. And these programs could end up getting hacked because there's not enough people interested in them. I mean, I'm not against fee increases. I mean, maybe other councillors are different. I'd be surprised if councillors had the notion that we should increase things 2 and 3 times. What I would like to see, what I propose, and I did some number crunching ahead of time, is, you know, our revenues from the stuff like the pool, the aquatics, the fitness, those things, the budget revenues was $420,000 this year, right? So if we increase something like 20% across the board, like that's an extra $80,000. That's a lot of money. You know, I think that's the kind of thing that council was thinking about when we say we have to move towards a user pay system. And if you do like 20% increases, you know, this year, the next year, the next year. You can monitor the effect that's having on our membership and then adjust accordingly, right? Like by doing it all in one fell swoop, I'm quite confident you're going to see an amazing amount of sticker shock. You're going to have a whole bunch of people drop the membership. And as anybody knows, if you double your fees but lose half your membership, you've accomplished nothing from a revenue standpoint. Your costs are basically going to be the same, and you have half as many residents in North Huron using the service. And at the end of the day, that's our job, to provide services to the residents of North Huron. So, you know, I just, and there's nothing in the proposal indicating that there's been any analysis done that raising the fees this much wouldn't have this effect. So I just don't see how we can adopt this proposal with so many unknowns.
Was there another hand up at this end? No?
I made a request, but if it's not going to be dealt with, then just tell me you're not going to deal with it.
The request, go ahead for Councillor Wright.
I had a request that if never mind. I'll deal through the integrity commissioner. I just asked this. I asked for a simple retraction, but I got. I asked. The question is directed through you, Reeve.
Okay.
And I asked for. Okay.
To clear what that we didn't hear.
If the stance is that I'm still in violation of the code of conduct, or then I need to know that I'm being held to that responsibility.
So then I can settle this.
So then I can be duly represented. I can't go out of here being accused and not have a way of clearing myself.
Okay, well, that Councillor Wright.
I can settle this. It was a verbal conversation. There's every reason to believe, given the Deputy Reeves' reaction, that I must have misunderstood what was said.
Okay.
Right? I mean, I thought I understood it right, and I apologize if I didn't. So, you know, I will retract the statement, absolutely, because there must have been a misunderstanding.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
You're fine with that then?
That's all I was looking for.
Yep, thank you very much. Thank you. So I go ahead now. So I asked Mr. Towns to come forward now, and I didn't notice, we had all kinds of answers here, but there's no questions to Mr. Towns. I guess I'm going to say my thoughts right now. As a Reeve, I was happy with what I saw in these amounts. Yes, there may be high amounts here, but I don't feel everybody goes to every one of those events. As you're wanting a multiple to go to all of them. I don't see that happening in there. And I feel that they're doing what was asked by us. I think we made that clear when we put in the way we want to address the budget. We asked for what is going to help and reduce the impact on taxation. And I think after our Belgrave meeting, we're told what they want to do. They want to see some prices, some things to come down to try and get more monies out of people using the systems. Because as I see it right now, 55% of the people using it aren't in our municipality. So we're supporting things. So I feel that we can justify these costs. I don't know what the electricity is going to be doing. The workers, how it is. All I know is that I feel that the staff went ahead and brought out numbers that I can accept. And that is and I am going with that. At this time, is there anything? Okay, we have two more here. I'll go with this hand. Go ahead.
Thank you, Reeve. It's the anomalies, like, why did preschool and the Bronze Cross fees go down? one went from, I'm gonna guess, it was from $50 to $8, $2. Like, there was something like, what? Okay, was that a textual problem or what? But, and then private lessons went up 3 times their fee. So like, it was just all over the map. I was just envisioning there'd be, like we did for daycare and stuff, it went up a certain amount, everybody sort of went up a little bit, but I expected this to be somewhat the same, like a percentage higher, 10% higher, 5% higher, something, but it's just all over the map, and it's confusing, and I'd like to know why some things went up and some things went down. Like, I'm not pointing fingers, I just, oh, why? You know, it doesn't make sense, but why? You know, things like that. That's what we need answers to.
But I feel they went back to, again, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, I feel they went back to the people in each position there, and they brought in these numbers. I got to put confidence in those people that come up with these numbers, Councillor Palmer. That's why, and there's a hand here, go ahead.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to shut down debate, but at this time, I'd like to put a motion forward to, that this report be referred back to staff, that staff receive additional input from council on where the direction they'd like to do with these fees and services. There was no explicit direction from council provided. And you know, it was just kind of an uncontrolled process, I think, right? So I'd like to put that motion on the floor.
So,
Go ahead.
I guess, just to fill in the blanks of your motion here, so the additional input from council, when are you intending to provide that input to staff?
Well, so I think staff should gather that, and, like, certainly we can send, and I'm open to what it is, we could send our thoughts in by emails, you know, we could put our, you know, whatever, we could put our thoughts together in whatever format staff wish, right? But, you know, I think we need to have a discussion on it. Like, I think we need to put our thoughts down and have a meeting about it, because this is huge, this is big, and we need, like, there's nothing in the report about what strategy was applied to this, right? Certainly one of the things I caught on to is it just seems to be applied to discretionary services. But why would user pay only apply to discretionary services necessarily? Why wouldn't we increase dump fees, for example, because we're losing $401,000 a year operating the dump, right? So I'm open to how staff would gather that information, but, you know, I think I need to understand and define the strategy behind these changes of fees first, and then figure out how much the changes should be.
What do you have there?
Yeah, so I have a motion here, but I guess my recommendation beforehand, if council wants to provide direction, I'd recommend that you provide that direction through a motion of council right now as to what you're looking for, as opposed to individual comments
I
back.
can't do that. We don't have the basic background information of how, of why some fees went up, why some fees went down, and why some fees were ignored altogether. So that's my point. That's why I'm referring this back to staff. We aren't, I have not been provided enough information to even provide direction, because I don't know what direction was taken in the first place in order to, like, repair this report, right?
Right, so what you'd be asking for is refer it back to staff for staff to present that detailed information.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so I've changed the motion to reflect that.
Okay.
So the motion you'd be looking for then would be that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby refers the report back to staff for staff to present detailed fee change information at the next council meeting. And once you receive that information, then
Yeah,
you can
and to
provide
clarify,
feedback
the
information.
detail we're looking for is not necessarily how much stuff went up and down, although that's part of it, but the strategy or the reasoning that was used to apply those, to make those changes, right? That's really the guts behind, like, why did you make these decisions to change these things?
So detailed fee change information and the rationale.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we have a mover, Councillor Palmer's seconder. Any other discussion? I guess we had it already. Go ahead.
I'd like to just add to the new one, how, like, okay, staff will come back with explanations and strategy and what have you, but say there's one item, the dump. Say, we feel it should have gone up a little bit, and it came off, neutral. Can that happen at that time? Like, because there's certain ones that were neutral, and I'd like to know why, and maybe we can add a little bit to them and, cut our taxes. Unless there's a standing reason to leave it alone, but, we don't know that, so. So as long as we're able to do that, pick out certain items, certain fees that are still sort of red herrings or whatever to us that we'd like to be dealing with, as long as we can still do that.
Councillor Van Hitterson had.
Yes, thank you very much. I am thinking we are wandering in waters that are not our objection to do that. Are we going to talk with our Director of Public Works and say, like, well, today I saw you got a quote, or I heard you're going to pave that road, or you buying the gravel there or there? Or I think we are way out of our job description with what we are trying to do here.
This is money. This
We-
means
It's money.
we are
It is a lot of money.
Okay, council, we have a motion on the floor. We have a mover and a seconder, and,
I'll read it back first.
yes, go ahead, read it. Sorry.
So your motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby refers the report back to staff for staff to present detailed fee change information and rationale at the next council meeting. So your mover's Councilor Wright, your seconder's Councilor Palmer.
Okay, all in favor? Defeated.
So then staff still required direction.
There's going to be an uproar.
So you want to look for another motion from the floor?
Yeah, go ahead, another motion, go ahead. Deputy Reeve, please.
I will make the motion to accept the fee schedule as presented.
All in favor?
Do you need a seconder?
Oh, sorry, seconder,
I'll second.
Councillor Van Hitterson. All in favor? Carried. CAO 7.61, 2023-23 Risk Management Enforcement Renewal. Are there any questions for our CAO Evans? That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report of the CAO dated November 6, 2023 regarding renewal of an agreement with the Sabo Bayfield Conservation of Part 4 Clear Water Act Services, and future that Council directs the Director of Legislative Services / Clerk to prepare a bylaw for November 20th, 2023 regular meeting authorizing the Reeve and the Clerk to sign an agreement with the Sabo Bayfield Conservation Authority for the delivery of Part 4 Clean Water Act services, and further, that the Council directs staff to incorporate $7,130.63 into the draft 24 budget for Part 4 Clean Water Act service. May I have a mover? Councillor Van Hitterson, Councillor Whitfield, all in favor? Carried. $7.62, again, Mr. Evans, do you want to present?
Great. Okay, thank you, Reeve and Council. So as you're aware, staff are working on the 2024 budget, and we thought this would be a good opportunity just to have a look and review our process. So the purpose of this presentation actually is to introduce you to a new approach or a new tool that we're looking to use for 2024. The approach is based on some philosophy, which we'll talk about in a minute, and it also aligns with the role of council versus the role of staff. So the three key areas we're going to look at are the budget process, the results overview, and things like capital. And this is just to get us thinking about a different approach. So just in terms of our budget process, in terms of our philosophy, so from a staff's perspective, in terms of we look at actuals from the previous years and we look at those as a reflection of what it costs to operate in the municipality. That said, we do need to account for anomalies when we are reviewing those actuals. So for example, we may have a staff vacancy. It may not be reflected in the actuals, but because we know of the vacancy, a particular budget line may be underspent because of that, and we need to account for that when we prepare our 2024 budget. As well, in terms of cost to implement, council has made decisions already, and so we will incorporate those decisions into the budget. As well, from a staff's perspective, we go into this process that savings are possible, and we look for savings to offset new demands on the budget. So one in particular that we look at is, for example, inflation. We also approach it from the perspective that little savings add up, so it might be $100 here or $200 there, but we look for anything and everything we can to try to achieve those savings. We also move forward on the basis that reserve and reserve funds are for one-time capital projects, that those funds are not available for operating costs. And as well, that reserve funds are available to help fund those capital projects, so that those funds are available, but they're specific to capital projects and not intended for operating purposes. In terms of roles, I think it's important to understand that council, your role is to make decisions, and your role as well is to provide direction to staff. And as staff, we prepare the budget detail. And our role is to inform you of the changes that are being made. From a staff's perspective, in preparing the budget, we incorporate the required resources to provide the service levels that you've established. As well, we evaluate and recommend operational changes as appropriate. And this is to ensure that we're operating efficiently, that we're using our resources efficiently, and as needed, or as we identify, if we see an opportunity for some adjustments that can result in some maximization of our existing resources, we'll certainly bring those forward for your consideration. And as well, we also identify and recommend cost recovery opportunities, which goes back to our earlier discussion in terms of the user pay. And as you recall, this is an item that has been identified in your strategic plan, so it's something we'll certainly move forward with in 2024. So in terms of the tool itself, it's referred to as a decision listing tool. And it's recommended that this decision-making listing be piloted for our 2024 budget process. And I have some illustrative examples later, but just for high-level context, it is a listing of every budget or policy change. It accounts for every dollar. It involves full disclosure of issues addressed in the numbers. It's also designed to be framed as a yes or no decision with budget impact. So council indicates yes or no, and whatever that decision is, the subsequent impact, which you will know in advance. The tool itself is a short narrative, so there's an explanation that goes with it. It serves as an audit trail, and I'll come back to that in a minute. In terms of it's a primary tool used to set the agenda and the priorities for the 2024 budget in this case. And all other documents are used to support the tool, but the tool itself guides and informs the budget process. In terms of the audit trail, basically from a staff's perspective, in terms of we look at the 2023 budget and we look at the actuals, and then we go forward looking into 2024. And as you can appreciate, there are some uncontrollable costs that have to be accounted for. These are costs that are easily explained and to which we have no or little control. And just to use a couple of examples in terms of hydro and gas costs or utility costs, they are what they are, and we can't control them. Then from a staff's perspective, in terms of we go through the budget line by line, we look for small reductions, and we explain those in bulk, and I'll explain that in a minute or so, or small increases that are explained in bulk across the board. So an example might be in terms of, uncontrollable costs, the line-by-line review. Basically, we've incorporated an uncontrollable cost into the line-by-line review. And further to that, in terms of large reductions that are explained individually. So this, for example, might be a staffing change that's occurred in terms of elimination of a position, which directly affects a line in the budget. Further to that is the cost to maintain. So this is basically the cost to maintain the current services that we have. There is discretion on the part of council in terms of what's maintained and what you don't maintain. So if you want to adjust service levels, you can certainly do so. And last but not least, the other category, I guess, that we consider are expansions. So expansions in terms of whether or not we wish to enhance a service, or an expansion in terms of we wish to offer a new service. But these are services that are at the full discretion of council and not legislatively required. So in terms of the tool itself, and again, don't focus on the content. This is really just for illustrative purposes in terms of how this would work. So essentially what you would have is a chart, a detailed chart that would be provided to you, and it could be 10, 15, 20 pages. It's hard to say. And essentially it would identify, kind of what it is. So just to use the one that's up there on the slide in terms of hydro. So hydro, as you know, is an uncontrollable cost. It affects all the departments, and there is a financial impact. So in this case, in terms of if you were to use 2023, you look at the 2022 financial statements, you look at those and you notice a shortfall, then you're going to make adjustments for your 2023 budget, or I guess 2024 budget. And as well, you can look at ways that you can reduce those costs. So in terms of retrofitting or operating economies. So carrying that forward in terms of what this indicates is that the change, if in terms of that uncontrollable cost in this situation, the increase or the change to the budget, and it's identified on the chart, would be, I'm just making up these numbers, $100,000. That is what we refer to as the value of the decision. So you making that decision is costing taxpayers an additional $100,000. And then you follow it through in terms of net levy change. And again, these are arbitrary numbers, so ignore the number. And then the levy change percent. So it illustrates in terms of, as a result of that decision or result of that cost, here's the impact on your budget. And that in this situation is uncontrollable costs, so you really can't do anything about that particular one. But you'll notice in terms of, at the top there, it talks about a running total. So net levy changes, okay, you've increased your budget to $500,000. Then if you pop down to the second item, you've made this decision, so you've saved $500, so now your budget is going down. And subsequently, your levy change percentage goes down as well from 8.1 to 7.9 in this case. So those decisions impact your budget, and you see both the dollar impact as well as the levy change impact on your budget. So you're seeing the decisions you're making and what those decisions are having on the budget itself. And as you go through the process, staff will provide you with the chart. You can go through and take off an item, or if there's something not there that you would like to see there, you can add that item on, and then the percentages and the numbers would be adjusted accordingly. And then once you do the whole chart, and we break out the chart, Then we would do what we call a results overview. And so basically, this is going back to my earlier comment, just in terms of, and I'm going to recommended staffing. You know, there's 5 items that on that chart with respect to recommended staffing. As a result of those, you know, it's going to add $235,000 to the budget, and the resulting cumulative levy is 3.5%. But you'll notice, for example, if you go down to line by line bulk, 9 items, you take off money, your resulting levy goes down. So again, you can see how when you add costs, your levy goes up, but when you take things out of your budget, your levy goes down. And this would serve basically to summarize, you make the individual decisions through the decision-making tool, but this shows you the cumulative of the decisions that you've made, okay? And I'll speak a little bit more here to the staffing, because I know that's something that council has discussed and mentioned. So basically, this would be designed and set up along the way that, you know, Department 1, and Department 1 has two employees, which is two full-time equivalents. So those, let's say, are 2 full-time employees. There's then a proposed change of adding another half-time person, let's say. And we're going to call that person number 3. So the FTE goes up from 2 by a half to 2.5, and the budget change from 2023 would be an additional $35,000. But if you go to, say, to department number 2 and you've got 4 employees, you got 4 full-time staff, you don't make any changes to your staffing levels, then you'll notice to the far right, no change on the budget, okay? Save and except for any COLA adjustments, for example. And then in terms of the bottom one, for example, you got 5 employees, you know, there might be 3 of one position and 6 of another position, whatever, but your full-time staff complement is 15. For 2024, you're deciding and making a decision that you're going to convert 2 part-time staff to 1 full-time positions. The net result is minus 0.03 because not both those full-time people, those part-time people were not working 2.5 days each. One person might have been working 2 days and the other person might have been working a day and a half. The net result is minus 0.3. So then you see, you know, kind of the total bottom. So this recommended staffing that would be part of the tool would be incorporated into the results page that I talked about earlier in terms of, you know, you'd have the detail of the staffing and then you'd have basically the results of that. In terms of the capital piece, so that's just on the operating side of the equation. In terms of the capital piece, North Huron, we have a practice here of not borrowing to complete capital projects. Reserve funds, you know, in terms of how we fund our capital projects, we fund them through other levels of government. So grants, for example, taxation, transfer to reserves, and unspent funds from completed projects. Reserve funds are not finite. You know, you continue to spend them, you don't replenish them, they're going to be exhausted. So you need to be aware of that. Capital projects are funded from reserve funds and taxation, which was talked about earlier. And I guess, you know, the other consideration is that, and I think we widely know that we have aging infrastructure, and that has certainly increased the needed demand for completing capital projects in a timely fashion. So these are kind of the high overall arching considerations in terms of preparing that capital budget. But in terms of how we use those capitals, those reserve funds for those capital projects, it's also important as we look at those capital projects and we look at those that I refer to it as a balancing act, just from the perspective that as you go through the 2024 budget process and for budgeting purposes, in the strategic plan, if you remember, we also talk about a multi-year budget process, and that's something that from a staff's perspective in terms of moving that forward. In order to do multi-year budgeting, we do need to look at having consistent and stable capital funding. So that's something that we need to consider as we go forward. Further to that, though, it's equally important that as a municipality, that we have healthy reserve funds are needed to mitigate, there could be an extreme event or events of magnitude, a weather event that we'll have to deal with, or a natural other type of disaster. Or we could have an unexpected infrastructure failure resulting in the requirement to make an urgent capital cost. So we higher than expected costs of goods and services. So insurance and fuel, staff certainly do our best in terms of projecting out insurance and fuel costs. But if there was an unexpected jump for some unknown reason, we need to have reserves for that. And then as well as any unforeseen major legal costs. So for example, a lawsuit that we might not know about when we prepare the 2024 budget, but if it comes forward, we need to ensure that we have the money in reserves and reserve funds to enable that to happen. So with that in mind, in terms of the 2024 budget process, again, this is just an example in terms of you would have, for example, a capital project or a purchase. So project one, $100,000, let's say, and this would illustrate in terms of how we're going to fund it versus reserve funds, so it could be a grant, for example, and taxation. But when we go through and when we determine our capital projects and our purchases for 2024, we'll then have the reserve funds with us and looking at those as well, ensuring that we're achieving that balance as far as we want to complete, and these are the projects we need to complete, but at the same time ensuring though that we don't that we have healthy reserves, that you don't complete your reserves right down, that you have nothing there in the event that you have any unforeseen circumstances. So
Could I make a comment on this?
it'll be through
Go
the
ahead,
meeting.
Councillor Wright.
Yeah.
Yeah, just maybe a thought about this one. You might want to consider impact to staff loading on this sheet as well. Because it's one thing to say we have the money for it, but do we have the staff availability to execute it? Because when I look at the capital list we had this year, I think it was unmanageable. There's 30, 40 projects on the list, right? So just a thought, you could look at impact to staff loading as well on the capital project list.
That's a very good point, and something we can certainly build into it.
Reeve?
Yes, go ahead.
I think also here, something that we really didn't get an opportunity to do last time, but we did in previous years, when it comes to capital projects, towards the end of our process, the budget process, council has decided this project stays, this project goes. And we need to be able to do that. You're giving us a procedure here, but when is there interaction with council?
So through you, Reeve, in terms of, so essentially at a staff level, what we would prepare is the decision-making tool that would have all the operating and all the capital on it. So in terms of, on December the 8th, let's say, we would present you with this chart that would be operating and the capital. So then you would then go through and decide, for example, we would have a capital project list there, and again, all broken out. But if you decided that project one, you didn't want to do it this year, or you wanted to scale the project down or make the project bigger, then there'd be an opportunity for council to provide that input into that. So we'll give you all the information, and then you tell us, you tell staff in terms of, I want to spend more here, I want to spend less there, I don't want to do that project this year, for example. So that's the decision-making part for council, and that's what would start to occur on December the 8th. Have I answered?
Yes, that, and we just need to make sure that we've got enough data. Like, I don't mind going into the weeds I think we need to. We have to face the public out there with, well, we did this year with a horrible percentage, at least in East Wanash, and it's important that we have our information in our hands when we decide anything along these lines, anything. Like, we can't rubber stamp stuff. Yeah. It was a disaster last year, and this is a different process, and I'm going to trust that it's going to improve. But again, we need, you talked about line by line, the staff goes through line by line, but, some of us want to. It's important. And if I have to make a notice of motion to get it, I will. It came too late last year. In the process, but, some of us want it.
Yeah, oh,
But did you want to turn the lights on?
I was going to say, just through you, Reeve, just in terms of, so after we provide you with all this information, then after you give us direction in terms of what changes you want to see to it, then we would go and make those changes. And then we would provide you with the line-by-line budget. We would email it to you or get it to you in some form or fashion, so you didn't have an opportunity to have a look at it before our next budget meeting.
Okay?
Okay, no, that
That's
sounds
what
good.
That's what
Yep.
we need.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time now, are you done, sorry, CEO?
Yep.
Okay, any questions now? Go ahead, your hand, go ahead, Councillor Wright, please.
Yeah, the other thing, just to add a little bit to the capital planning and asset management, and maybe our Director of Public Works is already thinking this way. Quite often what is done is you kind of put all the projects on the table, you categorize them as A, Bs, and Cs. As are the things you have to do because it's maintaining critical infrastructure or some other reason. Bs are what is important, and Cs are kind of nice to haves, right? And then usually what you do in a planning process is you see how much money you're spending on the As, and however much money you have left, you spend on the Bs, and if you've got some money left, you spend it on the Cs, right? So, again, from a alignment perspective, it might be good to build that into one of our budget meetings, to say, hey, here's the projects. Does council want to have a discussion and decide which are the As, which are the Bs, which are the Cs? And then that kind of makes the decision planning, it just kind of falls out at that point, right? Because you're going to do the As first and the Bs next and the Cs with whichever money's left. But it, just a thought. You might want to incorporate that idea.
Duly noted. Any other questions here for our CAO on this? Okay, seeing none, okay.
The only other comment I have, if council, now that you've seen the CEO's presentation, if you do have questions, like, don't hesitate to reach out to us in advance of, as we start to go through this process.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Palmer, Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Has this process been done elsewhere? Is there a proven track record with it? Has councils in those situations been happy with the process?
Through your Reeve, in terms of it has been known elsewhere, but I can't speak to the council piece. I know in speaking with colleagues that from their perspective, it has worked well. So hence, in terms of bringing this forward for the recommendation here is to use this for 2024, and we'll see how it goes, let's say on December the 8th, and move it forward through that.
Okay.
So it just establishes in terms of your role as council in terms of making decisions and providing direction to staff, and staff then work out the detail based on the direction that council has provided.
Deputy Reid, please.
Thank you. Through you, from what I gather on the difference between the process that we had and this new process that you've explained to us here, was put together because of the responses from last year, from the council members as to what they wanted to see and how the budget was prepared. So that most of the things that were a problem last year should be dealt with through this kind of a format. That's why the change was being made to this format, was to alleviate some of that strain on that was available last year.
Any other questions for us? Go ahead, Councillor Wright,
The only
please.
other thing I would add is just clarity on timeline. I'm sure you've kind of got a plan that at the first meeting you're going to present this on this date, and the second meeting you will get to this point, and the third, you know what I mean? Like right through to say, hey, and then that should get us to a point where we can adopt the budget in February or whatever time that is. So if you could lay that out, that'd be really helpful, at least for me, to understand, why we're here today, because I understand what the second and third and fourth steps, what the plan is. And as Councillor Palmer said, okay, we'll be receiving the draft line by line at this point, and, we'll kind of see the whole process. That'd be helpful for me. Thank you, Reeve.
Sure. Okay, that was noted. Okay. So any other questions? Good questions here. Appreciate that very much. Okay, 7.62 CAO 2023-25-24 Budget Process Overview, that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives a presentation from CAO dated November 6, 2023 regarding the 2024 Budget Process Overview for information purposes. May I have a mover? Councillor McBurney, Councillor Whitfield, all in favor? Carried. Correspondence, 9.1, Reeve Activity Report. Sort of a quiet couple weeks there, but that's all right. Again, Dimitri Marcus, he wasn't here tonight, but he helped at the job fair at Westcast there last week, and they had a good turnout. A bunch of people were looking for workers here, and a real good review from the previous one. One person had hired 14 people, and he's looking to get some more, so they're very happy with coming. And I know the one up in Bruce County, the Gay Lee spot up there, they want us to keep having these because they find that they're very helpful for them, and we just know what it is like finding workers. So, and it wasn't maybe attended as well, the other ones, because the last one was right after the foundry closed down, as we know, but a lot of them got jobs, but they opened this one up for everyone, so I think it gave a bigger overview there, so that was very good. And also on the main street, they had the Festival of Lanterns last Friday. Mr. Mark McDougall took that under himself, and with help from the BIA, and again, the fire truck was there, and it was busy all night. Excuse me. But it was just good to see a busy main street and lots of families and kids out. A very good turnout. Then Sunday there, they had a Diwali festival of lights of traditional. It's celebrated in India, but the new immigrants in town here, Gurpart Singh, he initiated it, and he's just wanted to share this event with the people of Wingham area. And there's over 100 people showed up to enjoy their culture, food, and traditions. It was very well done, and Gurpreet, he really is a benefit for our town here, and really appreciate the people that came out to support it. They didn't know what to expect as they came here, new workers to this country, and they haven't been able to do this for 8 years. So I think it was very good that they're able to rent the Legion and be able to put this on. It really made their day that they're able to do this. And that's it from the Reeve. Any council member reports, please. Go ahead, Councillor Van Hitterson, please.
Yes, thank you, Reeve. I represented North Huron at the Huron County Federation of Agricultural annual meeting. Mr. Robert James Scott from East Wabanach was inducted in the Agricultural Hall of Fame. He was one of the most dynamic, influential people during the Great Depression and World War II. He was instrumental in organizing Ontario farmers to bring electricity to rural Ontario, the election of women, unite and cooperate farmers so they would be able to purchase cheaper feed and produce more and more affordable food. Ben Lop was there. He was updating us on the carbon tax relief bill C-34 and the challenges that he is facing within. Dr. Wayne Caldwell, another East Wauwoners native, doctor of the University of Guelph, did a presentation about rural planning and about the preserving of farmland, the huge economic impact of agriculture for our Ontario province, and about the challenges of feeding a growing population and the pressure of housing that is being done right now with the growth of the people.
That's interesting,
It was a very good
Councillor,
presentation.
and this, all the people from East Wauwanash, that's something, eh, from past and right now, so very good. Is there anybody else? Okay, I'll move on to comments by members. Go ahead, Councillor Palmer.
This is regarding Dimitri. He proved me wrong. His business here, he's very professional. I quite liked him. I think we all did. We do. And gonna miss him greatly, but I have to say that he's left us in very good hands. Not hands, but in a position. He's left us in a good position, and I only wish him well.
For sure. He had respect to the people down at the job fair too, the different people from counties and different, everybody knows him, and he just has that rapport with them.
Yep.
Yes, we've been very fortunate to have had him over this past time. So, any other, sorry, Deputy Reeve, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. It's another staff-related, another staff-related thought of thanks for what I think was a great effort. I'd like to thank the staff for the report for the fees and charges, for their work in searching around to other municipalities and finding out what where we came out as far as being equal or undercharging or overcharging, and I found the report to be quite satisfying, and that was a big pile of work for them to do, and not have gotten the recognition that maybe they should have for that report. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Okay, no other comment? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Wright.
Yeah, and I want to clarify my kind of earlier statements. I also agree that staff worked really hard on this report, right? And when I make comments disagreeing with the deliverable, it's normally not about the effort or the quality of the work that was put into it, right? So I don't want those comments to be taken that way. But I will restate my fact that I think this would have been a much smoother process if the strategic direction that went into that report was discussed in council in advance, right? Members shouldn't get a report and then have to work backwards and try to figure out what the strategic direction was applied to a report. It's just, it's just not the way, it's just not best practice, I think, is the way of doing it, right? So I'm all about having conversations. I'm all about having alignment on council. I'm all about, all those things, right? And I think we need to take the opportunity more often in order to have discussions in council before staff undertake these reports, which take a lot of effort, as opposed to after the fact. Thank you, Reeve.
Thank you. Okay, no other ones? We go to bylaws, 10.1.
Excuse me.
If anyone has any.
Notice of motion? Seeing none?
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Reeve, just as a reminder, you have one.
Oh, that's under other business though.
Under business?
Down the road. So,
It's 9.4, is it not?
9.4 would be if anyone wants to provide notice of a motion.
I'm
they'd be
sorry.
bringing-
Yes, you're right. I stand corrected. I thought that's where the hole that went in.
We'll go to the bylaws, number 77, 2023, municipal park and lot lease agreement, 11 John Street West. May I have a mover? Counselor Wright, seconder. Counselor Whitfield, all in favor? Carried. Bylaw number 78, 2023, adoption of 2024-2027 North Huron Strategic Plan. I'm proud of this strategic plan coming forward, that's for sure, and it's going to give us a lot to do in the in our term of council for sure. So may I have a mover? Councillor Palmer, seconder, Councillor Deputy Faulkner, all in favor? Carried. Announcements. The next regular council meeting will be held Monday, November 20th, 2023 at 6 p.m. here in North Huron Town Hall Theatre. The next BIA board meeting will be held on Thursday, November 16th, 2023 at 6:30 Hot Stove Lounge at North Huron West Cass Community Complex. The next Blythe BIA board meeting will be held on Thursday, November 30th, 2023 at 8 a.m. at the Blythe and District Community Center. Are there any other announcements? I know we all know that we're probably trying to make it out to our the cenotaphs coming up. We have two of them in our, unfortunately, we have two of them in our riding here, so it is really good of that. So I hope we can all make it out to those. And are there any other announcements from anybody? Seeing none, I'll vacate my chair, please.
I just get excited, I don't want to sit in the middle. Okay, we'll continue on with section 12.1 is the notice of motion. I'll turn it over to Reeve Heffer for his notice of motion.
Yes, thank you, Council. I'd just like to bring this notice of the donation and fee waiving policy forward. I'd like to see prepare a follow-up report for Council's consideration in advance of the budget 2024 process. And we have as a council, we have a responsibility to manage our tax dollars that are collected to maintain and operate our infrastructure of our township and provide reasonable services for the 5,000 residents of North Huron. I recognize the importance of these groups that come and ask for things, but I encourage the residents to use their own discretion and support who they want. I, as one of the 7 sitting around the table, I don't think I can pick out the things where the money should be going, maybe the way the people want it to go. And I just don't want to use the tax dollars to support that. And I'll just give an example that I know so many of us we know have issues, that bad cancer word, and some of the people, instead of putting money towards their taxes, they'd rather put it towards maybe helping out there, maybe a family member, or it could be a friend. I just feel that I don't want to be making that decision where the tax dollars should be spent for these type of mind you, they're all good things. Don't get me wrong now. They are all very, very important groups that go on there and that come and ask us for money. But I feel it could be a way that we could not use tax dollars for this. And I just thank you for listening to my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to the clerk. I'm sure there's a notice has been written up there, a motion?
Yeah, so Reeve Heffer has his motion there, and then Reeve Heffer would be the mover of the motion, and you'd be looking for a seconder.
Can I get a seconder to the reason? Councillor Palmer? All in favor? Carried. I'll turn it back over to the...
Closed session reporting out that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby proceeds at
8:14 p.m.
8:14 p.m. to an in-camera session closed to the public under Section 239-2K and Section 239-2F of the Municipal Act to discuss the following: a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board, Thresher's Agreement renewal, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, cross-border servicing agreement. And further, that the CAO Evans, items 1 and 2, Clerk Lambs, 1 and 2, and Director Fertney, item 1, remain in attendance. May I have a mover? Councillor Wright, seconder, Councillor Van Hitterson, all in favor? Carried.
Can we have 5 minutes?
Yes, yes.